Hello and welcome to this pre-recorded edition of The Last Word on Spurs. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're listening to us for the first time, you can find us on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're across all major audio platforms. We are, of course, on Twitter at Last Word on Spurs. We are on Facebook and Instagram too. And here we are bringing you a special edition of The Last Word on Spurs. No games to review, which is why probably I keep getting more excited every time we're doing a pre-record. Bearing in mind, Spurs aren't in our lives to ruin it at the moment. Back alongside me for yet another great pre-recorded show, I've got Jason McGovern alongside me. Jace, how are you? How are you enjoying life without Spurs at the moment?
Oh, good, mate. Enjoying watching some games every day. Great to have 4 games on a day and just relax without Tottenham for a few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I know people won't be watching this. You are beaming from ear to ear. And that can only happen when Spurs aren't playing.
Well, England won the World Cup as well, the Cricket World Cup.
Don't forget that's the Cricket World Cup. There. Yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, I can't say the cricket's on for another few weeks, so I'll have to find something else to speed you along with.
I'm sure you will find something definitely within the next hour to definitely reprimand me with. Back on Last Word on Spurs, joining us, giving us their time, which we really appreciate. We've got Rachel and Steve, obviously THST co-chairs. Lots going on. It's lovely to get an end-of-year update. I should say it is definitely an end-of-year update, not an end-of-season update. Rachel, love to be back on Last Word on Spurs. How are you?
Oh, it's lovely to be back. Thanks for having us. I'm really well.
Pleasure. Lovely to have you back on. And Steve, lovely to have you back on Last Word on Spurs. I think you probably saw, as I said to you, by that Forest game, I was ready to almost pack up and have that break. So that's probably why I feel so refreshed right now and vibrant, really. How are you feeling? We're going to unmute Steve. We're going back to a lot of schoolboy errors on Last Word on Spurs here tonight, I tell you. Go on, Steve, we got you.
I pretty much share your view that it's quite welcome to be to have a break from. I know whether the players need a break from Spurs. I think the fans certainly need a break from Spurs. And after that Forest game and at half time in the Leeds game, I think I mentioned in the pre-chat, I just messaged a friend of mine and said, just please let this stop. So thank goodness for the second half against Leeds and. We can reflect a bit on where we've got to and relax a bit and watch some other football. It'd be nice if there was a few less 0-0 draws. I thought when Jason said England won the World Cup, that was a prediction for when this programme was going out in a week or so's time, but perhaps that's a bit optimistic.
Well, I mean, Jason is the mystic meg of the show. He most certainly can tell in the future. So who knows? Jason may be right. This show is coming out, though, before the World Cup does end. So if you do want to fancy a bet, go to Jason. I'm sure he'll give you the live acca odds on that one. Make sure you check him out, of course. Guys, before we do get into all THST-related updates, we have to talk about Spurs' start to the season so far. It's been topsy-turvy. We've had the good, the bad, the ugly at Tottenham. Rachel, I'll start with you. I'm sure if I was going to offer you to be 3 points behind Man City when the season broke up for the World Cup, I think most would have snapped your hand off for it. And when you add on that, obviously Spurs had topped their Champions League group. Therefore, do you think maybe Arsenal's surge, as much as I hate to say it, to the top of the Premier League, being 5 points clear, 8 points clear of us on the back of 12 wins out of 14, seems to maybe be changing our perception to the start of the season?
Well, yes, I think certainly the Arsenal thing is, for me, it's sort of equating with Leicester. And I'm already feeling like, yeah, well, they're going, but one of their games in hand is against Manchester City, but then Manchester City aren't winning all their games. And I can just feel the way the season's going to go is that we're going to keep thinking, yeah, but they can't, then they've got this bad run. And that's what happened with Leicester, and they never did slip. So, yeah, it is putting a bit of a sour taste. But I think we also have to really try and enjoy how well we're doing. It's just that we're not playing in a way that we're enjoying. So it's quite painful watching, but then you feel great because we've scraped a win. So I'm sort of all over the place, really.
It's funny because I definitely feel better in myself doing this 3 or 4 weeks on asking these questions than what I would have been had you asked me directly straight after Leeds, even though it was a roller coaster win. I suppose, Steve, the same question to you, how you feel really based on the fact Spurs are in that top 4. I mean, they have topped that Champions League group. I'm sure many, as I've said, would have been delighted, as you said, that we'd only be 3 points off, title winning Man City at the start of this season, 14 games in. How do you summarise, Steve, for you, Spurs' start to the season?
As you say, it has been very up and down, and even within games. I mean, that Leeds game we were talking about, I think it's always good, isn't it, to finish before a break with a win. And I think if we'd lost that game, or even if we'd drawn that game, certainly if we'd lost that game, we'd all be feeling pretty downcast. I think finishing top of the Champions League group and getting through to the next round of the Champions League was a huge thing. I think it was a huge thing for the players and for the club and for the manager as well. And I think Harry Kane said the same thing, didn't he, about, you're coming back after the break and you've got the Champions League to look forward to. That also, I think, will help us in the January window if we're trying to bring players in. I know people have commented on this podcast before that there could be quite an active January window because of the World Cup. So I think, I'm sure we much prefer we hadn't had some very poor results in the games against the people down the road, and Man United, and the home defeats against Newcastle and Liverpool were, disappointing, particularly since there are teams who are looking to be in the top four as well. But overall, I think, could have been a lot worse.
I just love the fact you mentioned the word January or window, and Jason is triggered by the sign of it. Those that are eagle-eyed that are listening to...
Shut the window, quick.
Those that are eagle-eyed that are either listening and watching this show will know that Jason somehow avoids having to ask any form of a transfer question for the sake of his own mental health. Jason, just to get your thoughts on the start of the season, Spurs, we have earned 13 points from losing positions already this season. It is the most of any Premier League side. And despite the criticism that Spurs aren't maybe playing the most attractive football at times, they have scored 31 goals in the Premier League this season, more than all but Man City and Arsenal. And only once have Spurs actually scored more than that at this stage of the season in the competition. Therefore, with all of that and encapsulating the start of the season, how do you sum up for you, Jason, now on a bit of a mid-term review, even though it has only been 14 Premier League games? How do you look at the season so far?
Well, I think a few weeks ago, it looked really, really good when, we'd lost that game to Arsenal, but we'd got through the Champions League. I think where it's gone wrong is that suddenly you lost that game with a really poor performance at Man United, where, let's be honest, 2-0 flattered us. Could have been 5 or 6 that night. Hugo had a miracle night, didn't it? And we still got beat. And then you follow that up with losing at home to Newcastle, and you follow that up with losing at home to Liverpool. So suddenly, you kind of feel like that momentum that we built up of having the best ever start to a Premier League season had gone. And that Leeds game was massive I think, just to give us all psychologically a lift going out of that break. But when you sit down, you think we're in the top 4 and we've qualified top of the Champions League group. And that's what you would have asked for. If I'd have said to you at the start of the season, you'd have taken that. But I think we've won the games we probably expected to win, and we've not won the games that we really wanted to win. And we haven't always been that pleasing on the eye. I think that has clouded a few people's judgments. And I'm not so sure we're just, I think partly we're not playing well rather than it being the way that we're playing, because last year we played pretty much counter-attack football. We were blowing teams away, especially that second half of the season with 4 at Villa, 4 at Leeds, 5 at Norwich, 5 at home to, was it Newcastle? It was 5, wasn't it? 3 against Leicester, 3 up at Leicester. You're getting a result at Liverpool, scoring 3 at Man City. We were scoring goals for fun. And I think we've tried to play that way, but we just haven't had the players playing as well. Sonny's form has fallen off a cliff when you think he's scored in just 2 games out of the 21 we've played, and in 1 of our 15 Premier League games. So, you're talking about the bloke who won a Golden Boot last year, and it's not because he's been unlucky most of the time. His form's genuinely been quite poor. So I think that's made us look worse than we actually have necessarily been. And then with the injuries that we've had, that's made it hard. But hopefully, chance to regroup and we get back into that rhythm of it after Christmas. I think the fixtures, without those group games going on, you've got the 2 games with Milan, but it's not quite every single week, is it? That high pressure is on you. And you think of Marseille, we couldn't have even had that as a dead rubber game because of we couldn't beat Lisbon at home. And you thought that was a real chance of a dead rubber game to rest a few. And in the end, that becomes a long physical, psychological battle as well. So it's been difficult, but we've still come out of it in a pretty good position. And like you said, if it wasn't for them being top, I don't think anyone would be complaining too much.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I mean, look, that's the thing at the moment. I do feel that it's in 2 camps with regards to, you know, the results, and then you look at maybe the style of the play. And again, I know there's a lot up for debate in terms of the way we maybe being set up, maybe the way the players are operating. I think, Jason, you know, you've always been a man that demands a certain style of football at Spurs. And you've, no matter who the manager is, you've always demanded that Spurs have to play that certain brand of football. So I'll hand over to you, because I know that's kind of the next part of where we're looking to steer the show. So over to you, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, the style of football's always been debated, and, you know, I've always wanted us to be, particularly at home against teams in the bottom half. For me, you should be front foot. But is it more important to focus on the style of football, or do you have to be a bit more pragmatic? And it is results that determine everything. And when you think we've gone behind, I think we've gone behind 8 times in a row, and we've gone behind 14 times this season. So is there a concern of the way we're actually playing, or is it like me, you just feel that we're just not playing the right way well enough?
We'll start with Rachel, then we'll go to Steve on that. Rachel, for you, what do you think on that in terms of the brand and style of the play?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. And I think obviously a lot of how you feel about the way we play is, did we win? And I can cope with us playing counter-attacking football and, you know, being not sort of Ginola-esque and Hoddle-esque and everything if we're winning. But when you watch a game and it's sort of, well, you know, like Nottingham Forest away and stuff like that, you know, it is turgid, and you've really got to look at the players that we've got. But the other thing I think can't be underestimated is just how many games we had to play in this first part of the season. They were playing every 3 days pretty much. Harry played every game. You know, and I just think you've also got to play a way that isn't going to ground them all into the ground. I think it was a very tactical decision to play, you know, in a way that preserved the players to a degree. You know, remember, Arsenal don't have the added bonus of the Champions League. You know, they can play anyone they like really on a Thursday night, can't they? But we've got to play, you know, as you said, you know, Marseille we still had to play the best players.
Yep.
So, you know, obviously we want to see the glory days, but to me, to be honest, for me, I just want to win a trophy. I don't really care how we play if we get that trophy. That's got to be the most important thing.
Yeah, it's interesting that, Rachel.
I think it's fair to say as well, I mean, if you look at it, the 4 Champions League teams, you know, Chelsea have struggled this year. Liverpool have struggled this year, and even in the last couple of weeks, we've seen City get a last-minute penalty to get a result against Fulham, and then they lost. They've just lost to Brentford. So the four in the Champions League has started to catch up with all of us.
Yeah, I actually agree with Rachel's point. I do think the level and the amount of games being played over that period did make it very hard, and there was almost that kind of I wouldn't say suspicion, but there was that feeling that maybe Spurs were generally, Steve, conserving their energy for the second half of games in order so they could try and, like I say, deal with the magnitude of the fixtures coming. And it's interesting because what I would say is that, I mean, we saw us play a real exciting brand of football back end or start the second half last season with Conte, where, you know, we were beating Villa very, very comfortably. Everton, we played well. Jason mentioned Leicester as well. So, you know, you can't say that this can all be on Conte's plate, because for me, you've seen last season that we have played a real exciting brand of football. And I think the hard thing I find to kind of deal with is the fact that, you know, everyone said to us that give Conte a pre-season and just watch the players go. And we haven't quite yet clicked. So I just wonder for you, Steve, where you also sit on that fence. Bear in mind, we've only played 22 games this season. We've conceded, you know what, in 14 of them first. Where do you sit on for you, Steve? Is it the players? Is it the manager? Is it a combination? Is it conserving energy? What do you think, Steve?
Well, I mean, as Rachel said, we've played 22 games in a very, very short period of time, and I think we've all felt that. Look, you know, I'm a big fan of Conte, and I think, you know, again, I think you've had this discussion before. If not Conte, then who? I mean, there aren't many better managers out there, and the guy has been successful everywhere. I agree with Rachel. I think it's got a priority to win a trophy. It's been far, far too long, and it's starting to define how the club is, which is just not how we would want it to be. I mean, I think the problem is with setting up in a sort of a defensive mode and to play on the break and play counter-attacking football is all very well when it works. But if you're going to play in that way, you can't concede goals. And so we had the problem under Mourinho, and that we go ahead, try and sit on a lead, and then concede late goals and lose or draw. And here with under Antonio Conte, we're conceding goals at the start and having to then come out and play to recover. So I mean, it's fine if you're sitting back and you're then scoring on the break and not conceding. But I don't think we've got the personnel in defence at the moment to be able to play that way. Now, I think we have got some very good players going forward. I think we really missed Dejan Kulusevski for that period. You can see the difference now he's back. I think that made a huge difference. I think we miss, obviously not going to talk about transfer windows, but I think we do miss having an alternative in having someone who's a number 10, who's a creative midfielder, who can change the way we play, particularly when we have gone behind. But, you know, I think we've got no alternative way of playing. I mean, the substitutions, the only variation is to go from 3 up front to 2 up front, and from 2 in midfield to 3 in midfield. But there's no real variation in the way we play. So we can't really change that around because we haven't got a number 10. I would have liked to have seen. But, you know, I think you can't fault the players for their guts and their effort. And I think you can see that from the way they've ground results out. You know, it's much easier on the blood pressure and the heart condition when we play a style of football that is possession based, like we did under Poch, and we had the ball for most of the game. Yeah, we still didn't all win, but at least you felt better when you got the ball rather than when you're defending the whole time. Yeah, but I'm certainly not critical of either Conte or the team, really. I mean, yes, I prefer us to play a slightly different way, but you know, what do I know compared to Antonio Conte? To be fair.
No, that's fair. I mean, Jace, we'll hand back over to you because, again, a lot of the surrounding is about, you know, maybe stadium atmosphere at the moment. I have to say very quickly before I didn't actually have them wrote down to make this sound this out. But I mean, shout out to THST flags and Spurs song sheets that have really tried to generate and build the atmosphere for the home games. And I definitely think they were massively part of the reason why Spurs did actually secure Champions League football last season. Of course, Conte and the players playing a massive part in that. But if you remember what that Arsenal game was like last season, I mean, would we have done that, or would we have got the results we got at home had it not been for the crowd being that 12th man and being so pivotal? And I think, again, that we are, you know, being the 12th man is there, you know, in the good and the bad times, which I'm sure, Jace, you're going to allude to your next point, which will direct to Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, as you say, Spurs flags have done a terrific job. And bearing in mind, that's all self-funded. I will say, I think they've put out an appeal for you to pay £1 a month, which, when you think about it, I think we can probably all afford £1 a month. And I think that scheme's open now. But they said that makes, you know, if you think that South Stand is, 17,000, if you can pay £1 a month, you know, you think what you could do from that South Stand visually. So, you know, good luck to the boys and that. I know I've done that. Like I say, I think we can all afford £1 a month. I mean, Spurs have been behind at half-time in our last 4 Premier League games. And we've seen a number of times the players now starting to get booed off. You know, the Eric Dyer booing against Liverpool, and then even worse was perhaps the Emerson Royal one. So, you know, are fans right to show their disapproval in that way, bearing in mind the price of tickets and things like that? Or is it a case of, look, you know, we need it's games like that where you really need to keep the fans on side? What do you make of the fans' reaction?
Well, I mean, it's difficult because, I mean, I personally would never, ever boo the team. I would never boo a player. And I actually, I mean, fundamentally, I sort of view the players a bit like I'm their mum. I hate the way people get targeted, and Emerson Royal in particular. I think it's really unfortunate. But having said that, everyone has got the right to express how they feel. You know, we're supporters. We get cross, we get fed up, we get thrilled, and we've got every right to show our feelings. Obviously, apart from making, you know, racist or homophobic or anything like that sort of comments, but everyone's got the right to boo if they want to. I personally don't think it helps. I think it's really demoralising, and for people like Emerson Royal, I remember other players in the past, you know, who were sort of targeted. I don't think he, for example, has made howlers that have ended up with us losing games. he's done some pretty wild crosses, or corner kick. I don't know what they were meant to be, but he hasn't made the sort of mistakes in front of goal that have ended up in us conceding. And yet he's been absolutely singled out to me. And I just think, having seen him on social media, he does a lot of extra work. He does, he's fundamentally a defender. He's trying to play for the team out of position. And I just think that by encouraging people, I was a head teacher. All my school policies, behaviour policies were about praising the good, and hoping that everybody wants to be in the good team because you get all the rewards. So that's my sort of mindset always. And where I sit is really near the players. So I often see their faces in the second half when we're attacking the goal. And you can see, there was one when Royal did the terrible pass, but you could see after that, he was absolutely gone. He could not pass the ball any distance. He kept just giving it to Dyer because his confidence was gone. And I think that our role is to try and get the best out of the team.
So it's a difficult one. Where I stand on it is that it's very hard for the player, because if you're going to continue being picked, then what do you do? And I think that's where there's an element of frustration where I think as fans, we all seem to have made our mind up that, he's not up to the standard. But then if the manager keeps for that role. But then again, like I say, he's been brought in under Nuno to be a right back, where he's now being played as a right wing back. It's a completely different role. I almost do feel quite sorry for the player. I know, again, he's earning a huge amount of money, and there's that element that comes into it. And Steve, I don't know whether you feel that are you of the mind that fans should have that right to boo, bearing in mind the extortionate prices it does cost now to go to games. I mean, we have to take into account that it's not just what you're paying for the ticket; it's then what you're paying for your travel, what you're paying in terms of food. I mean, for a family, that is it's a huge amount of expense, to take a couple of kids along. So therefore, on that basis, do you feel it's right, or do you think it's counterproductive, Steve, in terms of the booing?
I think it's clearly it's counterproductive in the sense
Richarlison scores. Richie scores.
I must just say, for those that are pre-record, for those that are watching it now, that is 2 weeks behind. But
I wondered why my WhatsApp groups have suddenly been going a bit mad. But look, it's that's brilliant news. I'm really pleased for him. That's great, isn't it? Clearly it's counterproductive, but it's instinctive, isn't it? I mean, it's just it's a reaction to how you feel at the time. I think I personally don't boo, but I'm not going to say that other people shouldn't be allowed to. And there is the point that we've been discussing about particular players. And actually, one of our colleagues on the board, Rob, I was chatting to the other week, and he was saying, he was always when people started getting on the back of Moussa Sissoko, he thought, right, I'm going to be supportive of Moussa Sissoko. And look, I'm not sure Rob's claiming full credit for it, but
Jason's the same. Jason was.
I was. Do you remember?
Yeah, exactly. And so there is that point. I mean, the one thing I'd slightly take issue with, I suppose, Ricky, and I take the point entirely about the amount of money that people pay, and the prices are high, and I think there's issues around that. We've talked about that before, and I understand that entirely. But it's not like paying to go to the theatre or the cinema, where you can guarantee it's going to be a good play with a good performance, and you get, what's going to happen because it's been scripted. We're not always going to win. I mean, I think that the reason why fans vent their views, I would be equally angry at Spurs losing if I was watching it on TV or if I was at the game and I'd paid 50 quid or 80 quid or 30 quid, or someone had given me a free ticket. It's actually more to do with the fact that it really means so much to all of us and to the people who are watching and listening to this podcast. We desperately want Spurs to win. We feel desperately angry and down when they lose, not just for the rest of that day, but for the rest of the week. There you go. Absolutely. How right that is, you see. But we identify with the team, rightly or wrongly. And as Spurs fans, everyone knows we're Spurs fans. We're identified with the team. So if the team loses, it feels like we've lost and something we've had no control over. So that's why people get so worked up and angry about it. Is it counterproductive to shout at players? I'm sure it is. I mean, I shout at them when they're on the telly. They're not going to be able to do much about it then. And they're not going to hear much from me in the West Stand either in the game. It's just a reaction. I think it's inevitable. But
Yeah.
I don't like concerted booing, and I don't think that does help. But I'm certainly not going to criticise people for that because they're reacting to the way that they feel. But I think that's more to do with, I think it's the identification with the club and the passionate desire for the club to win, rather than saying, I've paid my amount of money and therefore I'm entitled. There's a contract that says I should get this particular outcome. I don't think it works in quite that way.
Yeah. I just wondered, Jason.
Just want to say, Rick, I mean, Steve's right. I had that shirt done. It was whilst we were at Wembley. And I went, I don't know, I forget which game it was. It was just before the Inter Milan game, because the Inter Milan game is where he changed it round, setting up that late goal, wasn't it? It might have been one of those awful cup ties we had. There might have been the West Ham Cup tie, although I think he scored that night. But it was one of those games where over the first 3 or 4, the person sitting directly behind me was just, it was ruining my enjoyment of the game, because all you could hear was non-stop. And there was a racist element to that as well. And just whatever he did, it started when they come out for a warm-up before the game. And I thought, do you know what, I've had enough. And I didn't particularly, I wasn't a fan of Moussa Sissoko myself at the time. But I just thought, I've had enough of this. And I got that shirt done because I knew I was sitting directly in front of him. And I made a point of then everything that Sissoko did in the game, I stood up and clapped. And almost tried to block the person out so he couldn't see the pitch. So I just stand up as soon as Sissoko got the ball. But it wasn't that I was a big fan. But I think you're right. And it is like that with Emerson. But the one difference I'd make, Rick, is I don't feel sorry for what he's going through, because he is a professional footballer that is training day in, day out. Now, if you're the typist and you can't touch type after learning the thing for two years or something, you know, you're going to lose your job, aren't you? And the boss is going to call you in and say, how the hell can't you type a letter for me? Or, you know, whatever we do in our professional life, if we make mistake after mistake after mistake, and it's the same mistake every single day, we'll get a rollicking from our boss. So, you know, the fact that this is a person, you're asking him to just cross the ball sometimes, and that they train, you know, day in, day out, and he still can't cross the ball, that's where I don't feel sorry for him getting the flat, because, you know, work at your game. And we saw with Moussa Sissoko that he did work at it, and he did improve.
He did.
And players do improve. You know, we've seen other players get better, but with him, he still looks exactly the same player from 2 years ago that he does now.
So I don't think, from your perspective, Jason, you're not expecting a Moussa Sissoko turnaround for Emerson Royale.
I'm not. I have to say I'm not. And I think...
We'll be sitting here in a couple of months, Jason, and you'll have the shirt with everything on the back.
Well, he hasn't got a song for him yet, so I can't put a song on the back of it.
Probably just as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's again, it's one of those debates that will rumble on. I mean, there's always that element with regards to, you know, the fans and the players that, you know, I've always thought, you know, for me, of course, the fans have to be supportive and be the 12th man, but at the same time, I also do feel it is down to the players to also give a reason, you know, for the crowd to support them. So that is a very difficult balance. And again, I will repeat the fact that we saw last season that I think without the crowd being there, especially some of those home games, Spurs would not have achieved Champions League football. And again, huge amount of credit has to go to Conte and the players for how we did turn around that season. But we can't forget just how pivotal the fans were in that, how, again, THST flags were incorporated into that, and again, Spurs song sheet. So I think it's really been a big joint effort. I mean, I think the final part of this segment, where it feels like we've gone back into the season, I just want to talk about expectations. Coming over to you, Steve, first, then we'll go to Rachel. Now, Spurs are only 3 points better off than what they were at this stage last season. Now, it's funny because at that point, obviously, we saw Nuno Espirito Santo pay for his job. And it has been, I think Jason alluded to the fact that we've had 3 defeats in our last 5 that have really, I think, exposed some of the defensive frailties that we've got in this squad. And even with the win against Leeds, I don't think that can mask the fact that, if we've mentioned, there are certain alarm bells that are ringing. Let's hope they will be addressed in January. And the fact that, you know, we've gone out to the Carabao Cup exit in a really tame way, as I mentioned, you know, I'll be honest with you, although we are on a World Cup break, I'm still gutted by the way Spurs have gone out of that competition. I know Jason's laughing at the fact he still can't believe I'm not over this yet. But I just wonder, over the course of these last 14 games, and you add in the Champions League and that Carabao Cup tie, has your expectations changed at all for the season, Steve, so far?
Well, I think you also, as well as how many points we've got compared to last season, you look at you compare with the results against the same teams last season as well. And we talked earlier about those games against Newcastle and Liverpool at home. Well, we beat Newcastle 5-1 last season, I think. And we drew against Liverpool. So, I mean, that's, several points worse off than we were there. So, and there is those results against the teams around us in the top of the table, which are problematic. So, I mean, it is, I think we came into this season with much greater expectations than we had with previous seasons. That's probably a factor in it. This time last year, Conte had just been appointed. We were very positive about that, but the season hadn't been great. And even then, there were spells under Antonio Conte where we lost at home to Southampton and Wolves within a couple of days. We lost that home game against Brighton. We were on a bit of a bad run. So you forget about that as well. I mean, I do think I do understand your point entirely, Ricky, about the Forest game. I mean, I was at that game, and it added to by the M1 being shut between junctions 18 and 16, which meant that everyone didn't get home until about 2 a.m. It was not a particularly great day out, and it was just a curious one because it wasn't that he'd sent out the kids and it was a weak team on paper. It was a tired team, but it wasn't a weak team on paper. And I do come back to the point that Rachel made earlier. I think we all desperately want to win a trophy, and that's one that's definitely gone. And it's a competition where there are very few games. So if you get beyond the first few rounds, you're really in with a shout, particularly when some of the other teams have been knocked out. So I think a lot of it for me, a reason of cautious optimism is that getting through to the next round of the Champions League. When that goal was disallowed against Sporting Lisbon, I have to say I didn't react terribly well. I'm glad the camera wasn't on me as opposed to on VAR, because I thought that could have been a defining point of the season. If that had then meant we'd lost in Marseille and we'd gone out of the Champions League, I think it really would have been a huge dampener for the players and the club and the supporters. And we'd have come back really thinking, well, what's the rest of the season all about? I think there will now be that feeling that they can push on and they can, there are things to build on there. Richarlison's back, Kulusevski's back. Bentancur's been fantastic. There's a lot there, isn't there? And if you've got to be feeling that's a lot better place than we were this time last year, and a stronger team than we were this time last year.
Yeah, Rachel, coming over to you. I just wonder from the start of the season to now, as you're in your mind, expectations changed. I mean, what do you think is almost the minimum requirement this season for this group and the manager? What would you say has to be the minimum that we achieve?
Well, I think the absolute minimum is qualifying again for the Champions League. But I suppose the reason that I'm really at a bit of a loss as to how we're likely to do is the World Cup. We have no idea. Like this, a few days ago, at the time of recording, we were worried that Harry Kane had done his ankle. It turned out it was his foot, and he hasn't done it. If he gets an injury during the World Cup, that's going to completely change how we think the rest of the season's going to go. And the same can be said of Sonny, who will come back, I'm sure, stronger. Bentancur, loads. Richarlison, we don't know who's going to come back in what sort of condition. So for me, we've got to qualify for the Champions League again. But I do want a trophy, and I just think let's go for the FA Cup then. Yeah.
Again, you look at now what's winnable, and by the token of fact, listen, with the Carabao, it's no longer an option. You do for FA Cup, it's winnable. I just hope Conte does take that seriously.
Oh, what a goal from Richarlison! Bicycle kick. What an amazing goal!
What I love about
that's the goal of the World Cup.
What I love about this? This show's being recorded 2 weeks. This show's recorded 2 weeks behind at the moment. So let's just hope Richie.
He's just won the goal of the tournament. What an amazing overhead kick.
Richie, well, there's a positive. There's a positive. He's back.
You're not seeing it. He's flicked it up with one foot and then he's done the bicycle kick with the other. What an amazing goal. What an amazing goal.
Currently, as things stand, that is up there for goal of the World Cup. But again, we are 2 weeks behind when it's going to go out. So who knows what is next to come in these 2 weeks. But it's left Jason starstruck, so it must have been a great
fantastic
strike.
Goal. Fantastic goal. Type of goal Gabriel Jesus couldn't score, mate. I tell you. No chance.
Let's hope that happens in his next 2 weeks whilst he says that. Jace, just to bring you back down to earth, what do you think now, Jace, for you is a realistic expectation this season when you look at the fact that where we are at the moment, top 4, top in that Champions League group, obviously Carabao Cup no longer available to us, FA Cup to kick in, I think, from January, February onwards. What do you think now for you is a realistic aim for the season?
Well, I think, like Rachel said, we have to get Champions League football again. Even though we haven't necessarily been great in it so far, just those nights of going to Champions League games it sounds cheesy, doesn't it? When you hear the music, that you the old hairs on the back of your neck stand up. But it's true. It's just an amazing night, and to be able to sit there and sing the You Play Thursdays and things, and it looks like they'll get it as well, so we won't sing that. But just being in that Champions League draw, the excitement around the group stage draw, the excitement around then the knockout round, and here we are. I'm looking at Milan with Leao score for Portugal today. I saw Theo Hernandez play for France the other night. Coming on, you're thinking these are AC Milan players. Giroud scored a couple the other night, another AC Milan boy. So that anticipation you've got, and there's going to be a lot of unhappy ladies on Valentine's night, isn't there, next year, having to suffer a night with Tottenham playing on TV rather than a romantic dinner. But no, it's just the whole thing around the Champions League is fantastic. But you want to be there in the latter stages of it as well. It's not just scraping through the group. So that's a big thing. I'm like you, Rick. I'm a little bit disappointed with the Carabao, because I kind of think that's actually better than the FA Cup now, because it's a final that's played in February, that it's out the way before the run-in, and if you've won it, you can relax a little bit and think, right, that's silverware in the cabinet. And to think that we would have had a game against Lincoln in the net, a lot of people think it would be Blackburn away. The draw was done alphabetically, so actually we'd have been a different number ball, and it would actually be home to Lincoln. We would have been at home to Lincoln. And so you're thinking, what a great chance. Yeah, what a great chance to have played Lincoln. And actually, despite all the fixture chaos, I think it would have done us good to have had a proper competitive game before we go to Brentford on Boxing Day as well, just a genuine game. But Champions League football's the thing, and can Conte get us like he had in that second half of last season, where we genuinely have a chance, because we went to Anfield and we did go to the Etihad last year and get results, so we can do it. We can do it. We bashed Arsenal at home, and because you will have to play one of those big boys in a semi-final and the final. Let's be honest, you're going to have to, I think, beat two of those other 4 or 5 clubs. So can we possibly do that? But we'll have to wait and see. But Champions League football's the must, and I think we'll get that. I genuinely do.
I love the fact you're meant to be calming down after Forest. I feel raging now off the back of what you've just said. I'm meant to be more relaxed.
You were steaming that night.
I was so angry.
I'll tell you, it was good fun. It was good fun.
Oh, I don't know about that. They're more of a horror show, really. What we are going to do is we are going to go for our first break of the show for our listeners on audio. For those that are watching, listening, we're delighted to be joined by Rachel and Steve, the Tottenham Hotspur co-chairs, giving us some of their time as we bring you an end-of-year update from the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust. Lots still to touch upon. We've got to touch upon, of course, the fan-led review, lots of ticketing inquiries, the Spurs app. We've got lots that we're still going to be covering off here. And I say catering as well. Must have catering in there. Always a topic on Last One on Spurs. Back to the solo chips days of Cat Jace. That made that point very poignant, and it actually was incorporated. Solo chips. It did happen.
She got it across the line, didn't she?
She did get it across the line. She most certainly did. We'll turn our attentions. Obviously, we are recording this show. We have to remind you guys during the World Cup break. So there are elements where you will have Jason screaming out of his chair when Richarlison does what he does. And I can't predict what else might come in the next few weeks, depending on when we record and what day we record on. So you might get more of Jason going absolutely berserk, depending if there's a Spurs player playing. But I think what has sparked a lot of debate, Jace, is, of course, the World Cup in general, with it being held in Qatar and the controversy around the elements that it brings. So I'll just hand over to you, Jace, to start, which I think you're going to direct to Steve to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously controversial for so many reasons with the with the workers building stadiums, and then we've obviously had all the controversy about armbands with the LGBT plus community. I mean, is there lessons there that number one, do we think that footballers should be involved in the actual players should be involved in the political side? Because I saw Eric Dyer's press conference for England the other day. I think he got asked 12 questions, 9 of which had nothing to do with football. He got asked whether he would go into football administration when he finished his career. And he said, look, I'm 28. I'm not even thinking of that. And so, should players be having to do all the political pushing? And then also, are there lessons that the Premier League can learn to maybe read the room, feel how angry football supporters are, and think, do you know what, fans do pay a lot of money. They are a massive part of the game, and perhaps we've got to put concerns of fans and groups of fans much higher up that priority list than we do. It's interesting that Denmark, I think, are trying to look to pull out of FIFA to set up a group. And if they go down the UEFA route, does UEFA read the room and think, right, here's a chance, but we've got to improve on racism issues. We've got to improve on sponsorship issues within the game and the way the game is run.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, well, the reality is that everyone involved in this World Cup has been put in a political position, because the cup has been awarded to Qatar in the first place by FIFA and by the people who voted on that. And, out of the, I don't think there's any allegations of corruption by Qatar, but out of the 22 people who voted for the cup to go there, I think 16 of them have since been either kicked out or had to resign from FIFA over various things. And it was, a political decision by Qatar, as it was in the same way by Russia in 2018. They wanted to host the World Cup because they wanted to try and promote and improve their image across the world. Now, it may well have backfired because of the protests there have been, and quite rightly. But it's wrong to say, I think, I know you didn't put it quite this way, Jason, it would be wrong to say keep politics out of football when this is a deliberate political decision to award the cup to a particular regime so they can try and sports wash their own reputation. Now, you mentioned the workers quite rightly. There were quite rightly, when the Olympics were hosted in the UK, there were no deaths at all in the construction of those stadia. Quite right too, that should be the minimum. There were discussions with trade unions around how that was going to happen, and it was proper health and safety. There have been multiple deaths in Qatar building the stadia, which is completely unacceptable. I went out on a delegation to Qatar in 2016 with various trade unionists, lawyers, journalists, politicians, and we saw the conditions out there, and the conditions of the migrant workers in this working for subcontractors, living in squalid conditions with 8 or 10 blokes to a room, with no separate facilities, with appalling sanitation, and discriminated against depending which country they came from. They were paid different amounts of money, whether they came from Nepal or from Malaysia or from Bangladesh or whatever. It was just completely unacceptable. And I know that Qatar will say that things have improved since then, but if you look at some of the reports in the press recently, a lot of that is still going on. On top of that, you've got the treatment of women in Qatar, and you've got issues around LGBTQ plus supporters who aren't feeling able to go there. I was watching a very good video on the BBC the other day where they were speaking to some LGBT fans who were talking about why they didn't feel able to go to the World Cup to support their team. One of them was a guy I know who's a Welsh fan and a Spurs fan. And he said, he's not 64, he's only half that age, but he said, his country hadn't qualified for the World Cup for 64 years. He was so elated at them qualifying. Then he realized he really couldn't go. And it is the reaction from FIFA, the heavy-handed reaction from FIFA, the stuff around the armbands. It's just completely unacceptable. And I think that it's quite right that people focus on that. And I hope it backfires really on FIFA and Qatar, because it's drawn attention in relation to both of them, the fact that they do ride roughshod over human rights and over workers' rights. And I think it's quite proper that people draw attention to that. And I think it's welcome, actually, that players are showing an awareness of that and a wider responsibility. And also that we're acknowledging the breadth of our fan base. We work very closely with with Proud Lily Whites, with Spurs Reach, and with Spurs Ability. And, it's that there's a much more diverse fan base, and it's entirely proper that that's recognised across football.
Yeah, I mean, Rachel
Can I just come in just for a quick sec, Rick? And you and I have had the conversation off air, just so anyone that is clear where I stand. I have absolutely no problem with the Middle East region or the Arabic world, or however you want to describe it, getting a World Cup. Absolutely none at all. I have no problem that it's a mid-season Europe, because I've said a truly World Cup should go to all continents. It should go to Australia at some stage, rather than constantly going to the US every 12 years or something. And I think it's right that every region of the world should have the right for a World Cup. And I've argued as well, even with the timing this season, the Asian leagues have had to stop mid-season for every World Cup. The South American leagues often have to stop for a World Cup. So actually, you know what? So the European leagues have had to stop for the first time ever. We used to have Russian leagues. Remember when the Champions League, they weren't never playing between November and February, were they? So you'd have a Champions League game when they hadn't been playing for 2 months. So the disruption in the leagues happens to lots of leagues around the world. And as I say, no problem whatsoever for me with the Middle East having the World Cup at all.
Yeah, Rachel, coming over to you, it's a really multifaceted issue you've got, haven't you? With obviously with the whole status of the World Cup and maybe where it's being held and what that then incorporates the difficulties it's got over there. Do you have an opinion on it, Rachel, or is it a difficult situation which, in any which way you turn, does have a number of surrounding issues which simply just can't all be addressed, strategically one by one? It just seems there's a number of surrounding issues that people just don't feel comfortable of, from the human rights element of it to, again, the armband. There's a number of different issues which have come up already. And I must say, we're recording this only, a week and a half, 2 weeks into the World Cup.
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone's made really good points. And I am also very much pro the World Cup being a World Cup, and that it should go round the world. So, for example, I was actually lucky enough to be in South Africa, not for the World Cup, but in the bit when they were building up to it. And we went to the Nelson Mandela Stadium, and we visited lots of schools, and they were so excited about the World Cup going there. But I do think that, as with, nominally, owners of clubs, there's a fit and proper test. There should be fit and proper tests for who gets the World Cup. And I don't think that can be skirted around. So I don't mind where it is, but it needs to. There have to be human rights issue. There have to be standards that you can't go below, and I think we have gone well below them on this one. I actually don't have a problem. If a country's culture is that you don't have alcohol in football stadia, that's the culture.
Yeah.
If you're visiting, that's fine. And so in that sort of respect, I agree with Hugo when he was saying about, when people come to France, we expect them to behave in a certain way. No alcohol, that's an issue. That's not an issue to me. But not being able to be who you are, that isn't the same thing. It's not like I can go 4 weeks without a drink. That's not the same thing as I can't. I've got to pretend that I'm not gay, but if I was pretending that I'm not gay, that is it's just not acceptable. And to have issues about are two men allowed to share a hotel room? Actually, it's really expensive to not be able to share a hotel room. There's so many things, and all those points Steve was making about the way those stadia were built. It actually, I know lots of people who feel really sort of just very reluctant about the whole World Cup. It's taken a lot of the joy out of it. And I think people do have to question. I'm not saying that people shouldn't have gone to work in in Qatar, but people should be able to sort of really think about why they're going and try and justify it. Like Gary Neville when he was on Have I Got News for You? I mean, Ian Hislop really put him through it. But I think, it's good. He's earning a lot of money. He's going out there. He's standing on a particular political platform, and you should be able to justify it. And there are justifiable reasons why, if you're a footballer and you're in the World Cup, you go there wherever it is, but you've got that privileged position of being able to shine a light on what's going on, and so use your voice.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with a word of that. And like I say, it's an ongoing topic. I'm sure by the time this does go out, I hate to say this, there might be even more news surrounding what is happening with the World Cup. And again, like I say, I think the most important thing is that we want a game that is for everybody and doesn't discriminate and doesn't eliminate anybody from being part of that. And again, let's hope we are trying to build to that. I think that's the key. And I think, as Jace, you alluded to this fact, there's a lot of lessons there to be learned, and we just hope that they are being learned and being taken on board for future World Cups, wherever they may be held. And again, with that point you make, Jace, the World Cup should be going all around the world. We shouldn't have to, stop, it going to a certain degree of a place where it should go. But there you go. We are going to turn our attentions back to Tottenham and on and off the pitch. Jace, we'll hand back over to you. We've got lots still to get through. So, Jace, we'll hand back over to you. And then, like I say, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I mean, the breaks come, obviously, and I think it's a welcome time for all, but there is the elephant in the room of Antonio Conte's contract. I think Rick hasn't put it in there, but Harry Kane's contract as well is now down to 18 months, which is even bigger. So how important is it that those issues get addressed pretty quickly now? Do you think they'll be addressed before the end of the season? And actually, I'd just like to add, if you were Conte or if you were Kane, would you actually wait until the end of the season anyway, if you put yourself in their shoes?
Well, I think my answer would be yes, I would like to see them sorted now, because if I was Conte or if I was Kane, I'd wait till the end of the season. So I'd rather, from a Spurs point of view, that they were signed up now when we're still in the Champions League, when we're still in the top four in the league, we're still in with a shout with various things. And you would want it to be tied up. Yeah, we were talking earlier on about the style of football. There are criticisms of Antonio Conte from a number of fans. Personally, I think he's a fantastic manager, and I can't look around to see anyone who's realistically going to come to Spurs and think that they would be better. So on that basis, I would like to see him signed up. I would like to see a long-term project in the way we thought we were getting with Poch. I think you need to keep building, need to keep adding, need to keep strengthening and playing the same way. I agree with you. I'd like to see Harry signed up for a further. I would love it if Harry Kane is a one-club player, if he spends his whole career at Tottenham and wins trophies here. I think none of us would like to see Harry Kane turning out at White Hart Lane in the shirt of another team. We'd all like to see him carry on playing for Tottenham. I'd like to see, I'm not quite sure why the Kulusevski deal hasn't been made permanent yet either, actually. I'd like to see that to be sorted out. It may not be a problem. It may be because of the way the contract's structured.
I think that might be.
I think that's it. It's just the loan was 18 months and they don't need to pay it. There's no discount to pay it earlier now. And I think it is an obligation if we were Champions League. So a bit like the Romero one. Yeah. I mean, I think it will trigger. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'd like to see them signed up and secured. I don't know whether it will happen. I suspect the club are trying to do that, certainly in relation to Antonio Conte. I mean, obviously can't be having conversations with Harry Kane at the moment. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I would like to see it all signed and sealed.
It's interesting, Rachel, coming over to you, because we had that situation at the back end of last season where, as fans, we were being asked to commit to a season ticket, and you're not quite knowing for sure Conte is actually going to be the manager. And again, as Jason kind of also throws in there, Harry Kane's contract is also due up for renewal. What's your take on it for you, Rachel? Do you expect the club to be actively trying behind the scenes to get these deals signed during this break, or do you think for the manager and for the players, they're happy to kind of almost let it play out, because it also maybe strengthens Conte's hand in the transfer market to keep Daniel and the board on their toes? Because you do feel maybe if he does sign, a 2-3 year extension in January or before January, maybe he loses an element of his power, what he might get in terms of a reward for January. What's your take on it?
Oh God! Well, first of all, can I just say that we will still be lobbying to get the season ticket renewal period stretched again, because that's a really important one, whether we know who the manager and whether Harry's signed or not. That's really important that we get that the window lengthened, so that people people with financial difficulties or for whatever reason, that you just have back to the normal period of time. But yeah, there's a good interesting take that it weakens Conte, but Oh, of course we want to get it sorted. We all need to feel that there's a commitment from everybody to this. We're being asked to commit, and we all do commit. We are committed for life. But yeah, we absolutely want to know. And I feel I get a bit tired of every week sort of reading something else about Conte. Every time another manager gets the sack, or every time there's some sort of slight criticism from anybody. Is he going to walk out? Let's just have a bit of stability. I can't take it.
I agree. I think we all really do want that. Next issue on next thing up for debate, which has been heavily been covered on by THST, and you guys are also right in the midst of it all, of course, is the speculation over the government stance on the fan-led review after recent events. Now, I must say that I was reading a piece last night before doing this that it doesn't feel like a huge amount has really changed with regards to the fan-led review. Of course, we have had, I think, subsequently 2 prime ministers since you've last both been on, which is pretty much unheard of. As much as Last Word on Spurs is a bit berserk, I mean, even that probably pushes it beyond the brink.
That is the crazy train. That really is the crazy train.
Yeah, that is the crazy train in
How many
itself.
chancellors?
Yeah, I mean, again, we might double up on staff if we're being honest with you, what we've had and what we haven't had over the last 3 or 4 months. I mean, people must be from the outside looking in at the UK and England thinking, what is going on? I mean, it is just absolutely berserk. I also want to say to them, you want to try living here? I tell you, I really do. Yeah. Let's start. I think this is directed to Steve, really. Steve, any update really on this fan-led review? I know, obviously, we've seen recently, of course, United going up now for sale. They're exploring opportunities, same as Liverpool. And I think, again, I actually saw an interview recently with the Supporters Trust for United, and they're talking about, having that club back. And you do feel that, will anyone really get their club back until there is an element of a fan-led someone on that ball to be able to steer the ship and, have that fan voice? Where are we with this, Steve, at the moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, a word of warning, this is a pre-record, so there may be further prime ministerial changes by the time this comes out. Who knows? There may be another couple of
Matt Hancock might have come out of the jungle to be prime minister.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But on the fan-led review, well, I mean, you picking up on that, yes. I mean, I think your assessment, not a lot seems to have happened in the last year, is a perfectly fair one. And Rachel and I were at a meeting in Parliament last week with Tracy Crouch, who wrote the report, members of her panel, Football Supporters Association, representatives of various supporters trusts and other politicians. And the minister, Stuart Andrew, who's the Minister of Sport, was there. And he wasn't really able to offer a lot more than saying the government remained broadly in favour of the review and he hoped to be able to say something soon, which is pretty much what they've been saying for about a year or so. And they've been promising a white paper as the next step to legislation, whereas in fact, actually, the report itself gave the basis for a lot of the legislation and they could have proceeded with it much more quickly. And the problem with it is that you'll have seen this commented on in the press by opposition politicians and by fan groups, that the stuff that's going on now with Liverpool and Manchester United is happening at a time when there isn't an independent regulator and when the fans aren't guaranteed a voice in what's happening. I think the Liverpool announcement about their potential sale of some equity in the club, that the fans weren't consulted with about that before. I don't think the Man United Supporters Trust, as far as I'm aware, were told about this before the Glazer announcement. And that just really reinforces why this is so necessary. Where are we at? Clubs are talking about fan advisory boards, and we'll come on to that in relation to Spurs in a moment, so I won't preempt that discussion. Yep. But we really do need this independent regulator, which needs to be properly independent of the football authorities. And we do need the introduction of a golden share so that clubs can't go and set up in new competitions or breakaways or so forth. And they can't change the name of the club or the colours of the club or where they play or where they play their home games, or go and decide that we should have one game a season played overseas or something like that. So it's very, very important that that pushes on. The government do say they're committed to it. In the course of the most recent but one Conservative leadership election, the current Prime Minister expressed his commitment to the fan-led review. The Labour Party and the other opposition parties are very committed to implementing it. We've got to, as fan groups, just keep that pressure on and make sure they find time in the parliamentary timetable and don't let this slide, because the reality is, and the Football Supporters Association made this very point in Parliament last week, there comes a time when the light shines on football governance and football clubs, and everyone says, yes, something's got to be done. We need to act on this. Something needs to happen. We need to make a change. If you don't make the change, then the light shifts somewhere else and the chance is gone. So we really do need to make sure this is driven on with.
Yeah, totally agree. What we are going to do is
do you get the impression that the clubs are actually fully behind it, or is not just Daniel himself, but all of the clubs, and particularly the bigger ones? Do you get that impression that that they're not particularly pushing for the change to happen and they're quite happy with how it is at the moment? Or do you think they are fully open to and receptive to it?
I don't think all clubs are in the same position. I think some clubs are in different position from the Premier League, and the Premier League's in different position from the Football League, for example, because some of the stuff is around redistribution money between the Premier League and the Football League. I think actually, paradoxically, the clubs who were involved in the proposed breakaway are more likely to be entering into agreements around fan advisory boards because they recognise they've got to do something. And we have made progress with Spurs in those discussions, and there have been boards, shadow boards, or structures established at Manchester United, at Arsenal, at Liverpool, Chelsea, I think, as well. So I mean, there has been progress there, and I understand from what's been said that it is some of the other clubs in the Premier League who are less keen on that fan engagement, and it often depends on the ownership structure and their attitude towards the club. So I think the clubs recognise they've got to do that. I think that they are less keen on the independent regulator, because if it is genuinely independent, then it curtails their freedom of action. And I think they're less keen on the golden share. And I don't know that they're necessarily certain that's going to happen. It depends on what happens politically. So that's why we need to keep that pressure on to make sure that we do get that external, not just self-regulation, because self-regulation just doesn't work and hasn't worked in the past. And you can see that with all the problems there have been, not just in Premier League clubs, but in clubs like Bury, Macclesfield, Wigan and so forth.
Yeah, I got to say, Steve, thank you so much for that. Really fascinating stuff. Really, really do. Thank you so much for that. What we are going to do is we are going to go for our final break of the show. For our listeners that are on audio, for those that are listening, watching in, we're joined alongside me by Jason McGovern, back on Last Word on Spurs, and we're delighted to be joined by both Rachel and Steve from the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust, providing us with an end-of-year update here on Last Word on Spurs. They've been very complimentary of their time, guys. Thank you so much. I'm laughing because Jason knew this was never going to last less than an hour. He knew it wasn't going to last less than an hour. We have got to battle through, and this will cheer Jason up. We're going to go at the speed of Adama Traore and rattle through. We've still got it. We've got to still.
That might mean our finishing is a bit erratic, possibly, but we'll see. But I'm delighted to see that positioning of the apostrophe has been corrected on the streamer going across the bottom as well. So
we are trying our best. Jason will surely pick up on that. If it's not the stats he's moaned about, it's the lineup or something else. So Jason will most certainly bollock us, especially who he needs to from the back house team of Last Word on Spurs. We've got to talk still about ticketing. There's the Spurs app, some inquiries about that as well. Catering as well. I know I read a request from Joanne saying, where's the donuts? We'll be covering that in this final section of Last Word on Spurs. I think we're going to hand
I've got the biscuit team, Joanne. Not eating the donuts.
We actually are going to hand back over to Jace, who's going to discuss, I think, a recent board meeting the Trust had. So, Jace, over to you. I think he's back being directed to Steve.
Yeah, I think that the last Trust meeting was, I think, the 18th of October. And a lot of discussion of a range of issues around the fan advisory board, ticketing, broadcast times, match day operations, transport. So can you give us an overlook of the outcome of that meeting?
Well, I'll hand that to Rachel, I think, in that case, on the meeting itself.
Basically, the board is full of people with really passionate about their roles and a whole load of talents. So it's a fantastic opportunity for everyone to share the work they've been doing and to agree policy to make sure that we're all on the right lines. But as I said, we were mainly in person. And obviously the fan advisory board is one of the big ones that we spent a lot of time on. But because we are having a few changes, obviously change of co-chairs, we also welcomed our new treasurer, Anthony Morkos. So that was his first board meeting. It was really great to have him on board. And, you know, we're sort of looking at making sure that we've got our policy right on everything, and that everyone is on the same page, that we all understand the purpose of the trust. And so we're actually going to be having a sort of an extra meeting, an evening event, where we're going to be really looking at all of those sort of areas, the sort of the values, the ethos, the plans, etc. So that was one of the things that came out of that meeting. And we're going to be doing that at the beginning of December. We've picked a night when there's not too many fantastic World Cup matches. Yeah, it's just a great opportunity for everybody to sort of share the things that they're doing. And, you know, obviously away ticketing was one of the things that we were discussing, because we get a lot of mail on away ticketing, and the fact that basically people can't get, it's a very small number of people that can get those tickets. They're people who have been going home and away midweek, pouring rain, you know, far-flung places with no transport back, you know, and hats off to them for doing that. But we are sort of talking with the club just about making sure, well, we're sort of encouraging the club to work with other clubs to sort of get the tickets that are digital, basically, so that we know the person with that ticket is the person at the game. And the other big one was TV rights, and putting pressure on when the Premier League negotiate their new contract with the television companies to build in something around the fixture changes. I think we might be talking about that later. But,
just
it's
on the
online, or getting straight with our policies.
Just on that point of ticketing, you said there, Rachel, just so I'll make sure I cover this question off that was sent into last one on Spurs. Ian Meadows says, any plans on keeping the ticket share option open for all competitions? Anything on that at all from your end?
Well, the ticket share is for season ticket holders for Premier League games, and the idea being that if you buy a ticket for a cup match, you've chosen to buy it just before the cup match,
right?
And that's where the club don't have it open. But I mean, we do get quite a mailbag on that, and basically, if people are in a position where they've bought a ticket, something, you know, maybe they've got COVID or something has happened, you absolutely should contact the ticket office, and they're normally quite reasonable. But also, we are prepared to, if you email us at info@thstofficial.com, you know, we're very happy to sort of take those on. But I don't think we're going to get anywhere with having it open all the time for cup games, because that was what I'd argue.
I mean, on that specific point about ticket share, I mean, that was a success we had, if you like, because the Champions League tickets, which we do think were priced too highly, and we continue to make that point, we'll be discussing again with the club. The first game against Marseille, ticket share wasn't open, and there was a limited take-up of season ticket holders buying tickets for that game. They couldn't move them on ticket share. And we then got the email later in the week about you could then buy 4 extra tickets if you were a season ticket holder. And we said, well, hang on. In terms of security and ensuring that away fans didn't come into home areas and so forth, surely it's far more secure if you pass it on through ticket share electronically to a named individual with a customer reference number. And as a result of that, ticket share was open for the subsequent 2 group games. And we're anticipating that it will be open for the Milan game as well, because things do happen. And also people, you know, do want to not just buy 4 random tickets in other parts of the ground. If they're going to go with somebody who is in their network, they want to be able to do it in the seats. And we've got a ticketing meeting coming up with the club next week on a whole range of issues. And that's one of the big areas that we do focus on with the club. It's a big area of our work, and Kat Law, former co-chair, is leading on that, along with Anne Thula. Rachel and I are involved as well. And that's a big area of work. And I know one of the things that you were touching on, slightly to anticipate a question, is the relationship with the club generally.
Yeah, it's going to be the next point. I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, if you can give us an idea of how that is at the moment.
I mean, I think firstly to say throughout the whole of the period, there's been regular contact with the club on these key issues like ticketing, like safety, like catering, like travel, like so forth. I mean, I think away ticketing is a particularly difficult issue because you can't satisfy everybody because there are a limited number of tickets and there will be competing views on that. But we have regular meetings with the club on that, and there's a regular dialogue on that. The bigger issue has been, obviously, there was a breakdown of trust around the whole European Super League debacle. We've been, the fan advisory board discussions have meant a high level of contact with the club at a senior level over a period of time to try and get a new structure in place. Now, the club has been, has recognised and has restated very recently that even with the establishment of a fan advisory board, they recognise the particular role of the trust as the democratic body, independent of the club, representing supporters, and that we will continue to have a strong bilateral relationship with the club on those issues. And we will build on that statement by the club and make sure that that is the case. But we've made quite a lot of progress on the fan advisory board discussions. There's a number of tricky issues still to be resolved. It's at that stage where you get to the last stage of negotiations and you do have a few tricky issues you've got to get through to get over the line. But we're certainly committed to working with the club and the other groups to try and get the best deal that we can, to not for ourselves, but the best deal that we can for Spurs supporters. So there's proper representation. And so that the type of issues, our test is, could the European Super League happen again without discussion with the fan groups first? And it's an absolute fundamental for us that the structure that's put in place must mean the answer is no, it couldn't happen again without consultation with fan groups first. So that is very much our point of focus. But we do feel we're rebuilding some of those relationships. And it's important, I think, to recognise, and I think the club needs to recognise this as well, that supporters groups will not always agree with the club. We're an independent group. We're not like the other groups. We're not funded or set up by the club. We are actually independent of the club. We won't always agree, but that doesn't mean we're at odds. We all want Tottenham Hotspur to be successful.
Absolutely.
And it's important we work together to try and achieve that.
Yeah, well, again, Steve Elkins, on behalf of all of us, is thank you so much for all your hard work, and likewise, Rachel. And again, I have to say that you, listen, it's voluntary. They're not paid by the club. You know, this is out of the goodness of your own heart for how much you love the football club. So I can just say on behalf of us, thank you so much for all your hard work. And again, I think this is why we love having you guys on Last Word on Spurs. It gives an opportunity for you to be able to obviously give some guidance as to what is happening behind the scenes, where some may feel it's a case of why are things going so slow, and you've laid out a lot of the reasons why things are slow moving. So it gives, again, our viewers, our listeners, the opportunity to understand a little bit more what's going on behind the scenes. And again, we thank you so much for that. Get this one to tick off your bingo card. Conscious of time there, you've got it. We've got quite, again, a number of things to get through here. So we're going to rattle through these. I'm going to come around to Rachel next. And I think the good thing is that we're kind of targeting each point now rather than going backwards and forwards, which is handy. Rachel, 28th of September, members of the Trust Board were notified by Supporters Liaison Officer Levi Harris that the club would be inviting One Hotspur members to register their interest in taking one of 1,200 season tickets, half season tickets starting from the Arsenal home game in January, for the remainder of the 2022-23 season, with an option of renewing for future seasons as the full season ticket holder. Just want to ask you very quickly what you've made of that decision and how you feel that's been received.
Well, I mean, I'll hold my hands up here and say that how I got my season ticket a long, long time ago was through a half season ticket when I was actually should have been at working, and I was looking on the Spurs website one afternoon, may or may not have been at work at the time, and saw that they were, oh my God, giving, half season tickets. So I got mine on the basis that it was a restricted view. But then after a couple of years, I was able to move, and it was, it was fantastic. Our survey, where we had over 6,000 responses, 6,001 responses, showed approximately 70% of people were totally pro the offers of half season tickets. So from that perspective, we think, great idea. But as always with these things, the devil is in the detail. And that's why we've asked a lot of questions, and we'll be asking them again at the meeting that we've got next week. So, for example, why are they not offering concessions for those half-season tickets and ongoing? So, for example, if you're a senior person, is it going to be in areas where other people of the same age would be getting a concession? And are they putting a cap on the amount of concessions that they're giving in certain areas? Another question to consider is this because 1,200 people haven't renewed their season tickets, and so this is from the original season ticket pool, or is this 1,200 tickets that are no longer going to be available to One Hotspur members, because One Hotspur members are finding it harder and harder to get tickets and sort of starting to question why are we doing this? And so we want to have a good analysis of where are they, what rows are they in, is it adding to the percentage of concessions that are being offered, and so there's a lot of questions. But although obviously we think it's great in theory, and they certainly allocated them when people expressed an interest, they did use, as we lobbied for, they did go in loyalty point order. So basically the people with the highest number of loyalty points got the first choice and the first conversation. So it's a qualified yes, we're supportive.
Jace, let's hand back over to you.
I tell you, Rick, I just want to talk about a half season ticket quickly. There was a story, I'll always remember it, a few years ago, of a Newcastle supporter that had an empty seat next to him. And he was constantly asking the club, I want to buy this seat. And the club was saying, no, that seat's not available, until eventually Boxing Day, somebody turned up in the seat. And when he said to him, where have you been? Apparently his wife had bought him the season ticket for a Christmas present. What a wonderful story. So he only got half a season out of his full season ticket.
Oh,
wonderful. Never forgot.
That is what a cracking story.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
That is brilliant. That is
got it on Christmas Day.
I don't know how he felt about
half
that.
a season already gone.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's about bittersweet. But yeah, Jess, let's hand back over to you.
I mean, another issue I think we've been talking about as well is the catering. I think the trust put out a big survey on the catering. So what was the results of that survey, and when can I go and get my nice Thai food?
Yes, indeed. Well, I mean, I'm sure you would probably agree with the general findings of the survey, which are that basically people are very happy with the range of food and the quality, by and large, of the beer and the range of drinks available. But what they're really not happy with is the price. So there have been 3 price increases in the last year. And I know that there have been price increases in absolutely everything, everywhere. But nevertheless, 3 price increases in the stadium is a lot. And the other thing that they're very unhappy with is the speed of service in certain areas. We get reports of particular areas which we have flagged with the club that are, really not acceptable. Now, the club, when we met with them, they've got a new person, actually, Andrew Taylor, who's now the head of catering, and he's come to us from Manchester City. So, he's
brings a trophy.
Exactly. Let's hope so.
Who says we're not getting the world's best? There you go.
Quite. But he was saying that basically they do approximately 40,000 transactions per match over the tills, which that's not 40,000 drinks. That's the your what you're paying for, Ricky, when you do your round. And
yeah. What? You never bought me one at all.
Only outside in Beaver.
So 40,000, and so they would sort of say, well, out of 40,000 transactions, you're bound to get some people who aren't happy. And they have quite a sophisticated data set, which they showed us, where you could see how many people were being served. So their point was, this particular bar, We looked at their data. They're serving somebody, on the till more than 1 a minute during half time. So you can't really say that person should be serving more people, but that's the customer, that's the provider's way of looking at it. From the customer's perspective, that's fine. But if I still can't get served because you haven't got enough tills open or enough people to serve me, it's no comfort to me that you're serving other people really quickly. So what we've said is that we would be delighted to accept their offer to go and have a look and go with them and show them some of these key areas. And I won't name where they are because it's not really fair on the people that work at those tills. But we know from our survey where people are saying you just cannot get served, and it feels like people give up basically, and after the game as well. But the club do say, and I'll put them here just in case anyone's interested. They say that there are 4 areas in the South Stand that people don't go to because I think they're at the ends, which is 249, as in by the turnstile, 249, yep. Gateway, 249, 250, 257 and 258. Those are quiet, apparently. So if you all head there, you'll be able to get a drink and even maybe a donut, Joanne. Quickly.
You know what's happening now, don't you? We're going to get multiple, complaints on Arsenal and Spurs. I cannot get served now in block 2. Was it 249?
But I do
come
think,
at us if that is the case.
Yeah, but one thing that we're all agreed on, I think, is that the opening of the South Stand, the Park Lane Square, which we've been lobbying for over a year. At the moment, they're opening at every match and having a screen, and that's such a good thing. Because the stands there are so well organised, and they're sort of professional caterers who are used to doing remote stalls, and they're you go through there and they're incredibly fast service, I think.
Can you do that at half time? Go outside the stadium. You can. Right, I didn't realise that. I must admit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
that's
Rachel, thank you so much for that.
Sure.
Yeah, for that. Yeah, quite literally for that really conclusive update. Jason, then back over to you. I think you got a question for Steve in terms of the publication of fixtures.
Yeah, the publication of the fixture. I think they've just announced, haven't they, the Premier League dates for next season. And no doubt the publication usually comes in June. But as it's been stated many times, when that fixture list comes out, it doesn't really have too much significance because so many dates move, and the amount of I instantly look at it and think, who's in Europe? Those games are going to be on the Thursday, not the. Those games are going to be on the Sunday, not the Saturday. So, what can be done with the broadcasters in general? Can we get to a stage where you do get far more notification of which games are being switched? Although I do see that, in fairness, from the broadcaster that thinks, well, how do I know what games are going to be the important games? 3 months before those important games are played, and when the Premier League clubs take so much money from the broadcaster, which we all want in transfer fees and things, there is that offset, and I kind of understand where the broadcaster sits as well.
Well, and I suppose part of that may be, have the clubs and the league sold their soul to such an extent that they're just really got no choice over all of it, and maybe they have. And I think looking ahead, one of the things that really needs to be pushed for, the TV deal is up for renegotiation. I think there's enough money in the game for the clubs, you would have thought, in the league to accept rather less money if it gave them rather more control over movement of fixtures and when they're going to be played, because they are just moved around all over the place. And there are various factors in that. So you're absolutely right about European games, and yet the league scheduled games and television companies scheduled games which it was obvious would have to move. So when our game against Newcastle got moved, it was because Chelsea against Man United had to be moved to the day before, because Chelsea were playing on the Tuesday in the Champions League and we were playing on the Wednesday. Well, you know which teams are in the Champions League.
Who was playing Thursday?
Well, I don't know. I assume that's why we're recording this on a Thursday.
I don't know, it was on a Thursday.
We were all free, so so they know that. They know that, and they should anticipate that beforehand. The other factor to that is that the Premier League announces before the start of the season the dates when they're going to announce the fixtures for particular months. And this season in particular, they have missed every single date. And some of them have been like over a month late in telling fans when the game's going to be played. And in fact, we've still only been told, they were very late telling us the fixtures for the second part of January. So the games, the North London derby and the game at Fulham, we've been told about. We've not been told for the rest of January, and we should be told for into February soon. So people can't make plans. And there have been instances like that Newcastle game, and we had, I think it was the game against West Ham last season, where games have been moved twice. So they always say, oh, well, the clubs can't be held responsible. The fixture list is published, but it might be moved for TV. If it's then moved for TV, people do think, oh, well, that's all right then, whatever the terms and conditions say. I know I can make arrangements for travel and accommodation or make other arrangements because, dare I say it, Spurs fans do have other things outside the Spurs they need to arrange as well, and then suddenly the game is moved again, completely unacceptable. And the point, sometimes I think they think, oh, well, if it's a game between two London teams, doesn't matter if you put it at an awkward time or move it around because everyone can get there. Well, it's not just away fans who travel to games. There's an awful lot of Spurs fans, and it would be true of other clubs, who travel from Dublin, who travel from Scotland, who travel from other parts of the country, who are grossly affected by changes in time. So I do think, really, fans are being treated with utter disregard here. Moving games twice is completely unacceptable. There should be some proper central well, it shouldn't happen, for a first thing. Secondly, if it does, there should be central compensation. We're also pushing back on the rail companies on this because, midweek games, evening games, it's almost impossible to get a train back from them unless you're going to leave before the end of the game, because it just the timetabling just prevents that from happening.
Yep.
And we also are pushing with rail companies to make sure that if games are moved for television or other reasons, that you can transfer your ticket that you've bought in advance, because obviously you save money by buying tickets in advance. And these, we've not really touched on this in this discussion today. We did in our last one. These are, troubled times. Inflation is through the roof. Energy bills are through the roof. People are struggling. And it's only right that clubs and train companies and so forth should be helping people out and saying, well, actually, people can't afford to have paid for train travel or have to rearrange things and then find or tickets and find that they can't use them. So I think there's an awful lot needs to be done here. And there'll come a point, and we'll see this again, I think, with the World Cup. We all saw what it was like during the pandemic when there was no one in stadia. Now, that was unavoidable because of the pandemic. If you keep pricing fans out of games, if you keep moving games so people can't get to them, people won't be able to turn up. The atmosphere will start to go. And actually, that will have an impact on the product, if you like, the television companies are seeing as well. So really, I think you're absolutely right. A stand needs to be made on this. And we're with other trusts and with other organisations, Football Supporters Association, pushing in very, very hard on this issue.
Yep. Just in terms of just concentrate a bit at the time, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, Rachel, and come to you and just ask you about the Tottenham Food Bank. So that, again, is very close, I know, to the trust and how they operate and work. And I think for us on Last One on Spurs, again, we recognise just it's actually quite terribly sad that food bank needed at all. But it's just a reminder of the current financial climate, as Steve touched upon there, that we're in, that they are in need of support at this time as we kind of build towards Christmas. And I'm sure, again, you'll be emphasising just how important that will be as we approach Christmas time again here, Rachel.
Yeah, totally. And this is another way that we work really well with the club and with the local food banks. I had the pleasure of being interviewed by COYS before, I can't remember which match it was. It was a European match. And the players all wore the food bank training tops. And that, the club do a lot of work with to raise awareness, as do we. So we're always looking for volunteers. If anyone is interested in working with the food banks, they really do need volunteers. And one of the things that they could do is get involved with the collections on match days. But there's lots of other ways that you can get involved as well. And actually, there are lots of part of our remit is to support the community. And I just want to put a little plug in here for the Antwerp Arms, who is a community pub, and we as a trust have shares with them, not worth money or anything, but just we're very committed to that, and that's where we have our quiz nights and things like that. But they are also doing a lot of work for the local community, and they have a collection where people can make donations. If you just contact the Antwerp Arms on Twitter, and people can make donations, and then they're putting on meals for the local community, people who are struggling in these difficult times, to come to the pub and have a nice meal. So that's another way that people can help.
Yeah, I'm just going to to Jason. Jason, let's skip ahead a little bit. And I think it's maybe right to bring in Harry Kane, who, of course, for England, he's the captain. He's the star for England of the World Cup. Harry is becoming very, very close now to a really important record in Spurs' history. I'm sure, Jason, you can elaborate on this, I think, and maybe start with Rachel and then on to Steve on this particular point.
Yeah, I think it's just now 5 away from equaling the late Jimmy Greaves. And of course, it's not just the goals he scored. He's played every single minute this season. Is there any plans for the trust to put to the club anything that Harry will be commemorative with at the moment that he does break that record?
I mean, it's an incredible achievement, isn't it? I never ever thought that anyone would catch up with Jimmy Greaves, because he really was, just the star of the club's history, really. So it's an incredible thing, and we will certainly be asking the club. They have we don't get a lot of joy really with getting the club to do things. I mean, they're not into putting statues up of players, but we will certainly make it clear how much fans would appreciate it, and I'm sure that they will be recognising it. And
can you just remind listeners or viewers, why is it that they're so anti? I mean, I agree we don't want 150 statues up, but there should be, 2 or 3 key ones, and just to say, well, we can't agree on them isn't a valid reason.
No, I don't think it's they can't agree on who it is. I just don't think that they just doesn't seem to be what they want. And in actual fact, we had a lot of it was a lot of work by Rob White to get the mural done, which I'm sure you'll all agree. We are so proud to have brought that about, to have the Ledley King mural. But we had to source. Well, Rob basically had to source that site to have somewhere that we would be able to have the that beautiful mural. But there's a lot involved in getting something like that put up. We know that there's that beautiful one of Sonny, but you can see also that it's already getting a bit old now, and it's I saw a photo of it recently, and it's looking tired. Whereas the Ledley one, it was done to last. And yeah, we'd love to see a Harry Kane one. I mean, he's already been given the freedom of London by the mayor, so I don't know whether he'd appreciate the freedom of Tottenham as well. Perhaps. I'm sure that the local council could do something. But yeah, I'm sure that they will. But I mean, I like statues. I don't understand really why they don't want statues.
Did you have a point on that, Steve? You want to come on that, Steve, finally for you?
Well, only just to say, I think it's absolutely right. I mean, what an incredible achievement. I mean, I think we'll all be very glad when he gets there. I mean, to be fair, he's scoring very regularly this season.
And let's not forget, he's just about to go through England's as well. I mean,
exactly.
To have England and the club, fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, I don't know if it was his first game for the first team. I remember, he played against Hearts in that second leg? We won 5-0 away, hadn't we? We played in the home leg, which was 0-0. Missed a penalty. And then I remember his first Premier League goal against Sunderland. Just flicked off, and tremendous. And then, of course, that's the one that set it all going. That free kick against Villa in 2014. The one that won the game.
Last time he scored a free kick.
Well, I was going to say he's been taking free kicks ever since. I tell you what, wouldn't it be fantastic? If he
scores a free kick,
he breaks the record with a free kick from outside the box. That would be the absolute. I just honestly, it's a fantastic achievement. He's been such a, and hopefully will continue to be such. I think there definitely needs to be some something to recognise that, and something permanent as well. And we as a trust, I mean, we're very, we don't want to give Rob another job to do, but we're very lucky to have Rob with his creative imagination and persuasive powers. So we'll certainly be putting our shoulders to the wheel with the club on that one.
Superb. Well, guys, listen, I must say thank you so much. Over an hour and a half, all your time. Jace, thank you so much. We even avoided the January transfer window for Jason. And that's why, again, he's beaming from the fact we somehow avoided that subject. I took it out for him. We didn't do that to him. Guys, thank you so much. I mean, just going to you, Rachel, I think it's important to remind our viewers and listeners that they can register to be part, obviously, of the THST Trust. And again, just want to emphasise that, obviously, the work that goes on behind the scenes, it is voluntary, guys. You know, these guys are not paid for what they do for the trust. They are lifelong fans of the club. They want to see the club do well. And again, I have to say, guys, thank you so much on behalf of us all for giving us so much of your time. There's been so many of you that have come on last week on Spurs over the course of the last 4.5, 5 years since we've been doing it. I think, Jace, we had Cat and Martin down for the Love Sport shows when we had that, and that was great to obviously have that as well. So we had some great times. So thank you so much for your time. And I think just a reminder, if you want, Rachel, anything else with regards to how people can be part of this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to say I've had a fantastic evening. I really enjoyed this chat. We always welcome new members. You can join us either as a full member or an associate member, and it's a great way to feel part of the trust, to help to influence our policy. We really do listen to members, and you know, as you know, we do the annual surveys, we have newsletters. There's lots and lots of things that you can do. But just go onto our website, www.thstofficial.com/membership. And for £10 a year, you can join us as a full member, or you can be free as an associate. Or if you're a supporters club, we also have supporters club memberships for people here and abroad. And the more people on board, the better, because obviously it makes our voice even more powerful. So, you know, do get involved. And we'd love to see our members at our social events coming up soon.
And indeed, we've got our annual general meeting on the 7th of February, which is in person in central London. There'll be a notice going out. So anyone who's a member of the trust is entitled to attend that. We're hoping to have a speaker or two as well. So it's a bit of a social event too. And it's the first in-person one for a few years now because of the pandemic. So it'll be great to see people at that. We'll put details out, but put that date in your diary for people who can make it.
And it is a case as well, if you don't like the way the club's run, or you have issues with the trust, and we know that there has been in the past with people, the best way to change that is to join the trust yourself rather than sniping from the outside. It's a lot easier if you can try and change things from the inside. So, and I know the trust, it welcomes all views. You don't have to toe the party line. It's there for people to join.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've got loads of views on our board. It's really brilliant. We have lots of really healthy discussions around things. We don't all agree on everything, but we all know that we're working for the greater good, and that we really, really do care about what's right for Spurs fans.
Absolutely.
Yes. Steve, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. It's been a fascinating insight into what's going on. I'm sure we'll catch up, guys. We'll probably say maybe after Christmas, probably towards February, March, and see what's happening in the world of THST. Fingers crossed we're making lots of progress on the fan-led review, ticketing, and everything that comes with that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you both. Thanks very much indeed.
And if we don't see you before, Happy Christmas.
Indeed,
absolutely. Yeah, like I say, Merry Christmas. Jace, thank you so much, Jace. Your second show in the space of a week being pre-recorded. Thanks so much, mate. Lots of stuff still to come.
We gave you a good history lesson last week, so we schooled you a little bit, didn't we?
They did. Yeah, we would have listened to that one already, which was coming out. That's coming out, of course, very, very soon for you guys. But Jace, thank you so much. Appreciate it as always. Listen,
no problem, mate.
Please keep safe, keep well. Keep enjoying the World Cup. We can see the beaming smiles with Spurs not in our lives. Don't worry, they're coming back very, very soon. But from Jason, from Rachel, from Steve, myself, as always, please, guys, keep safe, keep well, and come on, you Spurs.